Hey, did you ever think about writing a book? Do stories float around in your head? Do you see stories almost as movies? My name is Vin D'Aquino, and our next guest did exactly that. He saw a story playing out in his mind, and he said, I'm going to write a movie. My name is Vin D'Aquino, and our next guest is here to join us, Frank Carlino.
Hey, Vin.
Frank, let's talk writing, buddy.
Yep.
You have a storyline. It's not quite out yet, but you've been working on it quite a while. Tell me a little bit about who you are and what you're doing.
All right, I'm basically a guy that used to write a lot when he was younger, was very interested in it. And then, you know, I used to start but not finish when I was young. I mean, I actually did finish something when I was real young, but it kind of like works better as a comedy if I look at it today. I was like 12 or 13 years old. And then, you know, recently, about 2 or 3 years ago, I met someone like in the film business who needed help writing a script. And I decided, wow, like this sounds like a great opportunity, and I definitely want to, you know, sort of rekindle my efforts to actually finish something, and then, you know, have a real serious reason to finish it. And like, we did it. That was like 2.5 years ago.
So this story kind of grabbed you, and as you heard the story, you said, hey, this is a story I want to be part of.
Yeah.
Now, normally, that isn't what you do. I mean, how do you put bread on the table? You're a local businessman.
Yeah, I mean, I have a cafe in Mahopac called Brooklyn Coffee House. I'm sure anybody who's watching has probably been there or seen it. And, you know, it's a real tough job. It's a lot of dedication. It's a 6 to 7 day a week job. And, you know, it's...
And yet, at the end of the day, you go home and you have this movie playing in your head.
Yeah, I mean, no, I mean, it's a rewarding job because, you know, it gives some people something to do.
And you get to hear a lot of stories.
Yeah, you get to meet a lot of interesting people. I met a lot of nice people and, like, good friends. And, you know, I mean, it's good to contribute something to society.
Yep.
But I feel like nothing could really fulfill, like, you know,
so
the quest for meaning in life, so to speak.
Yeah, so
like
you
a
want
movie.
to leave a legacy. You want to leave something, and this movie, to you, is something that you might be able to contribute.
Well, this is what I feel like, you know, should have been my career, like, my whole life.
Okay.
And it's like, I knew when I was younger that's what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until now that I really, really think I'm going to get somewhere with it.
I taught school for 35 years. In the early days, I still had that yearning to write.
Yeah.
Now, Kiss the Candy Days Goodbye was my first book.
Oh,
and I did that all the way back in the 1980s. And it was pretty much a story of a young boy on a wrestling team who suddenly finds he has diabetes. Well, you know what? It's partly true, partly not. And I put this thing together nights and weekends, and it was an urge, a haunting to write.
I agree.
So this story for you is a haunting.
No, I wouldn't say this story is a haunting. It took a little bit to get motivated to tell the story, because much like you, who also writes, a lot of things I ever wrote and sort of almost comes from some personal experience, like you were saying. You know, they say truth is better than fiction.
Yeah.
Well, that's true in a way, but what I think is that there's nothing better than fictionalized truth, which is different than fiction.
Yep.
It's different. It's
Yep.
like the truth, but exaggerated. So it's like the best of both worlds, so to speak.
A young boy said to me one time, Mr. D'Aquino, how could I write an exciting book if my life is boring? And I laughed, but I understood where he was coming from. And what I said to him, it's not always what that matters, it's what if that matters.
Yeah.
And if you could take the story on it to another level and bring excitement to that story and talk about what could have happened. Now, the movie that you are in the middle of writing, it's not a biography, and yet it is. Is it the story of a person's life as it occurred, or are you taking some
There
license?
are some, yeah,
Yeah.
fabricated
Yeah.
fabricated things in there, but for the most part, and I like to tell you, it's finished. It's not.
Oh, it is.
It's not in the writing process anymore.
Okay.
Although, I mean, the writing process technically never really ends because you're always going to be thinking of more things.
You're
like,
absolutely right.
Even though we just submitted it to the guild so that it's like for sale now and that we can't change it anymore. Me and my co-writer decided to at some point we need to just stop and just try to sell it. But I'm still like thinking like, oh, this could change.
Yeah, I should change this.
It'll never end.
Ray Bradbury, who was an amazing author, who just died recently.
He did Fahrenheit 451.
That's right.
Okay.
And he said, someone said to him, "How do you know when your book is ready?" And he said, "When I could read from the first page to the last without making any changes at all." I thought, yeah, good luck. Every single time I go through my manuscript, I make changes.
Yeah, I agree.
But there's a point when you just say, it's like sending your kid to college. It's time to go.
But the parenting is never really over. It's just kind of like, become lessened in a way.
Yeah.
Like.
All right, so now let's do it. Tell me what this movie is about.
Sure. It's the true story of John Mallingon, who was a minor league baseball player for the New York Yankees in the 1950s.
Real.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
You can look up his stats online. Just go to baseballreference.com.
He's in there. Okay.
John Mallingon, and, you'll see his minor league stats from, I believe, 1950 to 1958. Played about 8 years.
Okay, so tell me his story.
Well, the whole story is he accidentally kills his best friend when he's a little kid.
Wow.
And, his family just blames it on him.
So how did he kill his friend?
Well, poor kids have nothing to do all day. He grew up in East Harlem, which was an immigrant Italian neighborhood in the 1930s, and they got nothing to do all day. So they one day, they got sick of playing stickball, handball, whatever poor kids play, and they made a makeshift javelin out of an old umbrella and like the spoke. No, they took an old broomstick and then took the spoke off an umbrella, tied it on, so to speak, and they would just throw it around. And one day he threw it and it hit his uncle in the head. His uncle was only 2 years older than him and was his best friend. It's a rare situation, but his best friend happened to be his uncle, who was also only 2 years older.
But not so much when families had so many kids. It was
there's so many. There was like Orlando was his uncle's name that he accidentally killed. Orlando had like 13 siblings or something, and John had like 8 siblings. It was
very, very easy to be close in age to the 9th kid or the 13th kid.
So anyway, Johnny, Johnny, the main character, he's 6 years old, and Orlando is 8 years old, and he killed him by accident. And the family didn't have anyone else to blame, so they kind of just blamed him, and no one ever really sat him down and was like, "Listen, John, it was an accident." He kind of just believed it was his fault, and then he thought he was a murderer, and he got a reputation in the neighborhood as a murderer. The kids in the neighborhood teased him, called him a murderer, and there was a lot of mafia influence in the neighborhood, and they called him the world's youngest hitman. And, he just grew up believing that it was his fault, and he basically ruins every opportunity he ever has because of subliminal guilt that he feels, and that's what the movie's about.
And it wasn't a day for therapy where you send him for therapy. People just kind of like pushed it under the table, and then the kid had to live with it.
The family didn't know what to do. They didn't know how to handle the situation. Now, I said a lot of it is fabricated, but I haven't even made up anything yet. So think about how crazy the guy's life is. The grandma says, the grandma was kind of like the head of the family.
Right, yeah.
She said, after the wake for Orlando, once they buried him, they said, "We'll never speak of this again."
And that's it.
And then they had all listen to her. And she said, "Oh, that's a good idea. We'll just never talk about it again." But that was actually the worst idea, because then John could never really... John just kept it inside.
Carried his guilt.
Yeah.
Okay, so he kills his uncle. How old is he?
6.
6. And he carries this with him. And now, does your movie begin with the killing?
Yes.
Okay, begins with the killing.
No, it begins with, it kind of develops a relationship between him and Orlando, and then I try to get to the killing, I don't want to say killing, I want to say accident.
Accident. You're right, I'm sorry.
But yes, he did kill him. I mean, he went to the hospital for a couple of days and then he died.
So then the accident happens, it's kind of over.
I try to get to it within the first 10 to 12 pages, because when you write, when you're trying to write movies to be sold in Hollywood, there's a lot of restrictions on your vision, so to speak, and you need to always keep the plot moving. And I would have done more to develop the relationship, but I had to get to that within you know, the
Now,
first
did
10
you
15
have
minutes.
to educate yourself on how to write a screenplay? Did you like take a book out or something? And
No, I mean, I used to write them when I was younger, and I knew how to write the format, you know. But
did you read screenplays?
yeah, I used to read. I read. I mean, I paid attention a lot more than usual. Even though I've always been a movie buff, I've paid a lot more attention to dialogue and pacing
Right.
when I watched movies. And I read a little bit more, and I used to read them a lot. And I knew how to write them in the format, but I would say I've learned a lot of how to conform to what Hollywood wants more. That's what I've learned a lot in the last 2 years.
You have to learn what it is they want. And it's the same thing with authors. I tell them the same thing. You know, you can put a manuscript together, but there's a lot of manuscripts that never got out of the slush pile because editors look at them and they go, come on, this guy doesn't even know how to write, for God's sakes. Look at this. And they get frustrated, and they don't have the time to go through hundreds and hundreds of books past their desk. They don't have time to play with it. So you have to have it as much of a finished form as you can.
Yep.
So, all right. So the accident happens, and then do we jump up a couple years?
Yeah, we're gonna now. I wanted to maybe develop a little bit more of when he was a preteen, because he gets a new best friend who has a common ground with him. Him and his best friend Paulie for life, from when he's like 8 years old till he's like 50. He has his best friend, and they have common ground because they're both kind of outcasts from society. I wanted to get to that right away, but I actually instead jumped to when he's older, and then I revealed some of the backstory of him meeting Paulie after the incident, like weeks after the incident. I did that with flashbacks later on in the movie.
Yeah.
That's all, of course, to keep the plot moving.
Right, right. And sometimes it gets a little confusing, but that, of course, depends on how it's presented. And a lot of that has to do with the director, too.
Yes.
The director has to decide, you know, the format of the delivery of the story.
Well, I tried to put a lot of the flashbacks within the first 40 pages so that you're not confused. And all the flashbacks are also in order. So, you know, there's always the idea you could put all the scenes from when he's young in black and white so it doesn't get confusing or something like that. Who knows what they'll do, but I'm sure I've made it not confusing enough where I think they could pull it off.
It makes it. All right. So now this is not the story of what happened then. It's the story of the rest of his life.
Well, that's kind of the backdrop.
Okay. So tell me, where does the story begin then?
So, you know, he's just believed that he's this like murderer it's kind of sad. He's got a lot of nightmares. He has panic attacks.
But it doesn't get in his way because he has some successes in his life.
He has some success. But, you know, everyone could have some success. In order to reach your full potential, you kind of have to have a clear head.
All right, so where do we go after the accident?
Well, you see that he's become this massive specimen now as a teenager. He's like 18 years old. And, you know, from all the physical... Well, he finds out that physical exertion makes his headache go away. It makes his nightmares go away. It makes the panic... So he starts running around all the time and, like, doing it...
Becomes an athlete?
Yeah, but he just basically does a lot of, like, working out.
Like a neighborhood athlete.
Yeah.
So he's not in, like, regular school sports?
No,
like,
he's actually a boxer for the mob.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
It's another whole story. So he becomes a young boxer?
Well, yeah, I mean, he becomes, like... He kind of falls in with the mob, but the movie never makes you feel like he's a bad guy. It makes you feel like he just thinks he is, so he has to be boxing for them.
So he has to overcome this guilt that he's carrying.
Yeah, and I don't know, he's so massive from all the physical exertion, which is the only way he can make his flashbacks, and that, you know, he's just a great boxer, and he just destroys everybody he boxes. And
so he develops a great record as a boxer. He's making the mafia money.
Yeah, but then
and he's
soon
making
enough,
money?
What? Well, yeah, he's making some money, but who knows what kind of cut they're giving him or how they're taking advantage of him. I mean, he's not the most intelligent, you know, character.
Okay. All right. So and as a result of that, he gets taken advantage of.
Well, basically, you know, after a little bit, no one wants to bet against him, and he kind of comes useless to them. And then Paulie's afraid that they're going to ask him to, you know, possibly go the next step with the family, so to speak, besides just boxing, you know, possibly.
So, which might be something like a drug runner.
Yeah, a drug, going to pick up money, extortion, anything like that, because he is huge.
Yep. So he gets involved from boxing, he gets involved in the wrong kind of business, and he starts doing things he
But
shouldn't
keep
be
in
doing.
mind, you still feel like he's a good person,
Right.
and he's just the only one who's confused. We're not at this point as the audience that confused about who he
So
is.
is he like a Rocky?
Yeah, it has a bit of a Rocky feel in the beginning. Yeah, it's somewhat Rocky inspired, but not too much.
Okay.
But anyway, yeah. So Paulie tells him, you got to get out of that. You got to get away from those guys. Next step's gonna come, and he's like, nah, I can't. Blah blah blah. It's pretty funny because the whole movie, Paulie never mentions the incident.
All right, so he avoids it too. Now, is Grandma dead and gone now?
Yeah. No, I'm not sure when his grandma died. Probably by the time by the
But
end
it's
of the
not a
movie.
big issue in the story.
Now, a lot of the family kind of just is there during the backstory, and then I kind of concentrate on his mafia, his relationship with him and Paulie, and his baseball playing, his boxing, and so on and so forth.
All right, speaking of his baseball playing, so now he's a boxer, and he's having a hard time getting gigs. So he does a little drug running, and gets involved.
He
in
doesn't
some
do
of the
drug running. He kind of goes and
money collecting.
yeah, a little bit, and then they pray for a miracle because they don't know what else to do, and Paulie's trying to look out for him, and basically a Yankee scout named Paul Critchell, who obviously that's
Real
the
guy.
scout that found him in real life, who was also the scout that discovered Lou Gehrig, the famous Yankee, and he finds him throwing apples at a boat, and he sees how far he throws the apples, and he's like, wow, I want that. So it's like, oh my God, the miracle happened. Like, this is the only thing that could get us out of this situation, and it happens. And then Johnny still won't sign a contract for them because of the guilt.
Now, is the mafia ready to let him go and let him do what he needs to do?
Well, John told me this himself,
So you actually met this guy, and you sat down and you interviewed
Oh yeah,
him.
he doesn't stop. Like he'll tell you, he'll talk to you all day.
Get him on the show.
Yeah, I would love to. I would love to bring him on.
He's like in his 80s, right?
Yeah, he's a cool guy.
And he's still alive today.
Yeah,
And he tells his story.
yeah, he loves to tell his story. He doesn't really like to talk about the incident.
No, that still bothers him. He's still carrying that guilt after all these
No,
years.
I mean, by the end of the film, you're going to see that he kind of resolves the problem. But there's always that small percentage of your brain that
Okay, so
kinda
tell
feels
me
it.
about the transition from the mafia to
Yeah, but
baseball.
anyway, he avoids it at first because he still has this subliminal way of sabotaging himself, is what he does throughout the whole movie. That causes a falling out between him and Paulie. And then when he's about to really screw up his life, with the mob, then he runs into Paul Critchell again. And then he's like, wow, this is not a coincidence. This has to be fate. And then he's like, all right, I'm going to go try to play for the Yankees. And, they can't do anything about it because it's the Yankees. So they
Yeah.
just have to let him go. So he goes, and then he's playing baseball, and he's doing all right, but he's still having problems.
And he's like in a farm club.
Yeah, he's in the minor leagues, and eventually he reconnects with Paulie, and Paulie helps him, kind
What
of
position
play
did
better.
he play?
Catcher.
Catcher. Roy Campanella.
He was known as Yogi Berra's successor. Like, if they had Sports Center or something back in the 50s,
Yeah.
they would be talking about him, being like, when Yogi Berra retires, this is going to be the new Yogi Berra. The Yankees have this great farm prospect named John Malagon, who's going to be the next Yogi Berra. He's probably going to be the Yankees catcher for years. But, it just didn't happen. But he had incredible talent and five-tool player, like everything.
So he plays for them on the farm, never goes up into the pros.
Well, what happens is he gets, drafted to the Army during the Korean War, and he's also a nuisance over there. See, I didn't get to this yet, but when he plays baseball, he always wants to sabotage himself because he still has this guilt, and so sometimes he plays well, and other times he's just a pain in the butt, so to speak, for the manager and for the whole team, and he's not a team player, and he kind of has a big ego, and he's not really like that. You kind of know he's a good guy, but he just has this way of always
Sabotaging
sabotage.
himself.
Yeah, exactly. There's no better word for it. He can't. I don't know. It's like he's got two personalities.
So when he's in the Army, does he play ball in the Army?
Yeah, he plays ball in the Army, and he starts boxing again because he gets put in the entertainment unit, which was like a special forces kind of
Yep,
unit.
yep,
Like,
yep.
they were entertaining troops coming back from the war.
With
So
Elvis Presley.
he hit 462 in
Wow.
in
462,
Army baseball.
That's like a
Yeah,
a great record.
I don't know if you're not familiar with baseball and like what a good batting average is, that's just an unheard of batting average. No
Yeah.
one in the major leagues would ever get that. Obviously, if he was in the majors, it would have been lower because it would have been better competition.
Yeah.
But That's a ridiculous batting average. And it just showed how good he was. And then he starts boxing again in the Army, and like Paulie's training him and stuff. And then he winds up getting to fight the Army champion.
Now that scares me, and it worries me a little bit. I don't know a whole lot about baseball and catching, but I know that they both have to do with hands. And I know when my relationship with Roy Campanella, who happened to have been a good friend of mine, he had so many operations on his hands because being a catcher beats up your hands. Now, as a boxer, it seems like a very unusual combination. I mean, you don't want to mess those hands up if you're a catcher or if you're a boxer. So he was able to do both?
Yeah. I mean,
okay.
Obviously it didn't last like 20 years. But
yeah, right.
Well, what happens with his boxing career is it's almost like Paulie kind of knows that he's probably better at boxing than he even is at baseball.
Oh,
and it's amazing. It's like this guy has just so much potential. Like even if he doesn't make baseball, he still has like boxing to fall back. He's just, and like it's going to be really cool if you get like an actor that's really like jacked, so to speak, to play him and just
So
show.
do you have an actor in mind?
I kind of have an actor in mind, but a lot of the actors right now that are more famous that would really draw a crowd are a little too old to play him. So they might have to get a lesser well-known actor.
But he ages in the movie, right?
Yeah, I mean, the actor who plays him would have to play him from 18 to 28. So it's kind of tough.
Yeah.
I mean,
But not bad.
it's possible.
All right, so he gets out of the Army. Now what?
Well, no, what happens in the Army is he boxes the Army champion and he knocks him out in the first round,
Woo.
the champ. And he just beats him so badly that he told me this too. Like he swore when he delivered the knockout punch that he swore his eyes rolled over.
Wow.
Like, and he thought he killed him.
Oh,
so then
no,
he
not
renounced
that
his
again.
boxing. He's like, I'm never boxing again. I'm gonna kill someone again. He's so afraid, and he's so like still guilty that he quits boxing and he ruins his boxing career. And then he goes back to baseball and tries to make it. And now what happens is he finds out that Paulie finds out that the coach. The manager accidentally killed his best friend, so he tries to bring it up to John nonchalantly without mentioning that he knows. Because one of the themes throughout the whole movie is that Paulie knows, but Paulie doesn't say anything because he knows how much it bothers John, and he knows everybody else tormented about it. So as like a token of being his best friend, he just never says anything. So he has to tell him about the manager like nonchalantly, like just try to bring it up casually in a conversation. And then once John finds out about that, he figures, I have someone to talk to about this. And then, his manager winds up not taking it well.
So they reach a point where he finally confronts this guilt trip that he's on. So what happens?
Well, the manager...
Does he accept it?
No. I mean, his manager, who's been managing this kid for years, like, John was in the minor leagues for 8 years, like, he just doesn't take it well, and he's also hurt by what happened with him. And he just kind of... It just turns into a huge argument, and it kind of mirrors what happened with Johnny's father when he's a boy. Skip, who's the manager, kind of just blames Johnny the same way his father did. And that's kind of like, once that happens, that's kind of like the last straw, and that eventually leads to him being basically kicked out of the organization.
All right, so how's it all end?
I don't want to give away too much, but there's a couple
I
of
have to pay for the ticket to this movie in order to know the ending?
There's a couple of other crazy things that would happen that if I told you right now, you'd be like, you're making that up. I'd be like, no, it's true. Like, no, I'm not making it up. It was very hard to fit it all in because it was too important not to put in there. But he eventually meets someone when he's an old man, when he's kind of past his prime. It kind of has a bittersweet ending, but he eventually goes back to baseball because he's able to tell his secret to a fellow baseball player named Ron, who then brings him to the Hall of Records and shows him that the whole thing was an accident. And then he's able to play baseball again as a 65-year-old man in the 40 and over league.
In a 40 and not pro ball.
No, but he's playing with guys 20 years younger.
Wow.
And he's the best player by far, and he leads the team to the championship.
Wow. So he comes to peace with this guilt finally.
Yeah, when he's
at
old.
like 60-something years old.
Yeah.
And now he's 80-something. He's still alive today.
Yep.
He's still telling his story.
He can throw 70.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's good. So he's come to peace.
Yeah.
And you have yourself a film. So
Oh,
now you have it all together. Now you had someone else who you did this with, right?
Yeah.
And the two of you worked together to get this done.
Uh-huh.
And now it's done. It's out there to be sold. And
Yep.
you're looking for someone to take this project on.
Yeah, well, Kevin, my co-writer, he's like a cameraman. He's worked on tons of movies, and you know, he can get someone to meet with him because he works with these people. He's not just some guy.
So you're hoping that any time now this is going to break for you.
Oh no! So Kevin's put it into a couple of people's hands that I think are very important, like a certain a production manager or producer, like somebody with power, so to speak, and we're just waiting to hear from them. And
Does this have a working title?
I call it Malangon because that's the main character's last name, Malangon. I mean, who knows what could happen? The title could change, but I like that title.
Yeah, me too. Okay, so that's all together. I have to ask you, when you're over at the Brooklyn Cafe and you're working,
Yes.
can people come in and say, hey, can I ask you questions about that movie?
Yeah, no, it happens every day.
Are you like him in the way that you're ready to talk about it if people want to know more?
Oh yeah, I love to talk about it. It's kind of frustrating sometimes because I have no news to report, and I tell them it's a slow process.
Yeah, it is.
You'll know something when I know something.
is.
And a lot of time they ask me so can I be in it? It's like, I'm not going to be the one deciding if you could be in it.
Right, that's right. That's
come
right.
on.
And you have to do the process. So for those people out there who want to be screenwriters, who want to write movies, your advice to them is slow and painful process. Try to get it all going. Got to get it out there. But your dream is there. Your dream to see this thing on the big screen is still sitting there waiting for you to happen.
Yep.
Well, sounds wonderful.
Yeah.
I know I'm looking forward to it. I'd love to see this happen. Any ballpark ideas? Are we going to see this film in a year, 2 years?
I mean, I honestly can't see it not happening eventually. I would like it to happen right away.
Yeah, of course.
Obviously. But you don't want to sit there and feel bad for yourself if it doesn't happen right away. I mean, things could be worse.
Yeah.
You can't get everything you want. I would love it to happen within a year or two, but maybe it'll happen eventually. It's always going to be for sale.
Well, there you have it.
Yeah.
Hardworking guy, has a career, but has a dream.
Yep.
Well, let's hope that that dream comes to fruition for you. We're shooting for you. I want to go to that movie theater and say, I knew that guy when this film was about to happen. Speaking of watching films and watching shows, watch this show. Tune in for our next episode where we promise to have an exciting author for you. Thank you for being here.